There really is a lot to unpack about this Mozambique situation because also yesterday, President Cyril Ramaphosa's special envoy, that's Sydney Mufamadi, met Mozambique's President-elect Daniel Chapo in a bid to address and resolve the ongoing political impasse in that country. The situation there poses substantial economic threats, of course, not just to the country, but also to the region at large. Border closures, for example, have delayed the movement of goods, leading to financial losses, even if it's for businesses that are dependent, of course, on cross-border trade. South Africa, for one, is a leading member of the Southern African development community, should I say, and often plays what is often a mediatory role in regional conflicts like this one. But is South Africa doing enough? Should it be doing more? Or should there be other players who are in this situation trying to quell it from where it is right now? Let's talk to Professor Christopher Isike, who is a professor of African politics and international relations at the University of Pretoria. Professor, thank you so much for the time. I don't know if you're able to shed some light on your thoughts. Is South Africa doing enough? Is that the main issue at hand here?
Good evening, Arabile, and thank you for having me. Is South Africa doing enough? Well, South Africa is already showing leadership. It has shown leadership in intervening or supporting in Mozambique in the past, with the Cabo Delgado issue, and is doing the same thing now. I am a bit worried about, meeting with the president-elect Chapo without also looking to talk about meeting with the opposition, Modlani, and South Africa exporting its brand of government of national unity of some sort, the same way they did in Zimbabwe, when Mugabe, Zimbabwe faced similar situation some years ago. And then also the same happened in Kenya when there was election violence, in the mid-2000s, is South Africa doing enough? Yes, this early stage interventions, sending a high-powered presidential delegation to talk with the government there in Mozambique is useful, but South Africa needs to do more and quickly because of the wider ramifications of not doing anything, or this conflict, the unrest escalating into a major conflict that will have implications for South Africa.
What do you think the president-elect should be doing at this stage? I mean, he's not really in office, but he ultimately is and meant to be ultimately. How does he quell all of this? And then how does SADC play a role in all of this too?
Well, the president-elect needs to be speaking to the issues that people are concerned about, which is the legitimacy questions around the elections that brought him to power. I think that it will not be useful to simply deny that there were no electoral malpractices. I think that facing them head on and putting out, olive branches for some kind of government of national unity or co-sharing of power in some ways that recognizes the opposition's position on the elections, I think would really help. And yes, SADC does have a role to play. I'm not sure that they can do much beyond sending emissaries to talk to both parties, and ensuring that there is peace and just enforcing, keeping the peace in Mozambique because of what the conflict in that region can do to, in that country can do to the region. But there must be a way to promote some kind of inclusive governance that will allow for dialogue, to reduce the likelihood of the protest escalating into a prolonged instability.
Prof, that's exactly the issue then, because now you're getting Mozambicans, of course, fleeing to neighboring Malawi, which, of course, could be quite significant. you have not just these protests happening and people fleeing those protests, but you then also have the situation with the prisoners and the inmates who have then escaped their jail. I mean, the number sometimes varies, but at least, more than 2,000 families have sought refuge in other countries as well. This could become a Southern African disaster, really, that we're looking at here, or migration crisis that we're looking at here. Is it time that we all played a greater part and we had a firmer stance on this?
Yes, absolutely. That's what I meant by the wider, implications. They are political, they are economic, they are humanitarian, and talking about the humanitarian challenges, the refugee flows would be huge on neighboring countries like Malawi. We've already heard about 2,000 people fleeing Malawi between Tuesday and Thursday last week to Malawi from Mozambique. The same thing would happen to South Africa. South Africa is a border country to Mozambique. Now, beyond this escaped prisoners and the wider implications on crime in neighboring countries, is even the migration flows itself. As people come in, this crisis then becomes exportable, and the implications on social balance within those countries, that is already suffering unemployment challenges, with more people coming to add pressures to the economic and social system, it will only lead to more conflict, right? So that's how conflict is, exported, and it will create serious humanitarian challenges, not only for in Mozambique, but in these neighboring countries, as we may be forced to start talking about refugee camps here and there and the governance of all of that. So it's better to nip it in the bud, and this is where we need to talk about the fundamental causes of this issue, which is the states in the continent, our governance structures. We need to address, the question of governance, and it appears to me that dominant parties, liberation parties in the region are already losing their sell-by dates.
Yeah, it actually feels that way. That's literally what you're seeing. You're also then getting what feels like a whole lot of conversations coming through from the opposition leader in Mozambique, then Venancio Mondlane, has had that, really rejecting the results, calling for more protests from his supporters. I mean, yes, he's not urging them to loot or damage infrastructure, but it doesn't necessarily help, because that just means we get the situation flaring up even further. Is that the right way for him to be going about this? Whereas if he wanted to challenge those results, perhaps dealing with the Constitution, dealing with the right methods, or even speaking to the broader community would have been the better way.
Well, look, he's done the right thing by asking people not to destroy their infrastructure in the country, because it doesn't help to cut your nose to spite your face, right? Or spite your mouth. I think that we must look beyond his cause. These people that are expressing their frustrations with the system are not just doing so, they are not just heeding the call of one man or the face of the opposition. They are expressing disaffection and discontent with the system that has failed them as people, as individuals. So we must begin to recognize their own agency, and that's why I'm talking about the need to look at the issues that the people are putting on the table, which is that the elections were rigged, and for me, an inclusive form of governance that will lead to some kind of power sharing, even if it's for a couple of years before another elections are held, would be more practical way to deal with this than just saying go through the Constitutional Court. The Constitutional Court has already validated the election. I'm not sure there are processes, and in other countries in the continent where similar problems have been encountered, and reference have been made to going by the book and going to the courts. The courts people don't even believe in those courts anymore. The courts have lost legitimacy, and the courts come out with a predetermined outcome. So there is a lot of frustrations with the system, which we need to start addressing and talking about, rather than looking at the agency of one man.
Can't agree more. I think getting to the bottom of this sooner rather than later is the only way it's going to avoid the kind of humanitarian crisis we're already seeing happening, but it flaring up even further and really affecting the broader region as well. We certainly hope that Mozambique is able to find a solution, and if not at the help at least of some of its neighbors, including South Africa. Professor Christopher Isike, thank you so much for the time. Really appreciate it. Professor for African Politics and International Relations at the University of Pretoria.